All right, this is another edition of a Hawaii Hangout with the FSE Outreach Program. It is May 11th, 2023. So we're about a month and a half from feature freeze for WordPress 6.3, which is planned to come out August 8th, 2023. So right now we're just here to talk about what's coming up in WordPress 6.3, what's kind of being worked on, where you can kind of find that information, and then also digging into some issues, whatever comes to mind for folks, and also just kind of getting a high level look at what's being worked really hard on to move forward ahead of feature freeze in beta 1 on June 27th. So I'm going to share my screen. And to start, you probably have seen this lovely issue from time to time. This is kind of one of the source of truths right now for what's being worked on for wrapping up phase 2, which is intended to happen with WordPress 6.3. So this was recently edited to add in some new work, which Paul, before we started recording, we were talking about how much is happening and changing. So this is an issue that you can follow and expect to keep up to date as work continues. And then also, I will not scroll all the way down, but you'll notice that I provide some updates now on like a monthly basis, kind of showing where the work is in progress, whether there are new issues, what needs design, where we are in the stage of things. So I think I have my update due next week, if I'm not mistaken. But there are a number of new issues, which is part of why I wanted to do this whole hangout, was to talk about them and kind of get into the details. But at a high level, this is the best place to go when you're trying to figure out what's going on with 6.3. There's also a smaller board, not smaller board, but more comprehensive board kind of going through various issues as well. So if you want to look at just everything that needs development, kind of broken down into different sections, you can. This includes stuff that's beyond a bit smaller projects than these larger items. But if you're just looking for top level, this is the place to go. There also is a new polish and UX board, which is kind of similar, even smaller. These items are supposed to be very dev-oriented, action-oriented, should not need design help. They're meant to just kind of have some fine-tuning along with this and kind of honestly give folks a break to work on something else and to kind of make sure that what we're building is intuitive and easy to use. I need to actually add areas to this. I will do that after. Those are the various boards and places you can follow along. I'll make sure to include the links in the recap. Before we dive in, I want to pause and see if there's anything anyone wants to talk about in particular. Otherwise, I pulled out.
Can I ask a question about that board? Is that board a good one for contributions, dipping in, and the UX and Polish board, or for WordCamp Europe, for developers that are UX curious getting involved in?
100%. That is part of,
okay.
I think I shared it with the core editor meeting folks, because part of it is
Yeah.
if someone just wants a small thing and they're not able to, reintroduce content editing into the site editor, but they want to help with the experience, it's a great place to go. So it should be something it's like actionable. You dive in, you click on something, you're like, okay, this is a contained bug. This isn't a huge feature set.
And so that's also stuff towards the tail end of the release might be a good place to go if you don't want to work on a big feature as well. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a really nice, it's just meant to kind of give people a place to go when they're trying to, move quickly without, this is a great issue that came up, I think, where it's like the gradient background repeats in a really weird way when you're using, we'll fast forward through this.
But that's a feature.
Yeah. So see how it repeats like that? Yeah. So like one of the style variations for 2023, like the Sherbert one, I think, has a gradient background and, it looks kind of funky. So it's like, let's see what we can do to fix that. Whereas on the front end, it doesn't actually look like that. So those kinds of like contained issues. Yeah, it's a great question. All right. So I'm going to jump in right now just to kind of go high level items. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I need to. So a couple of things on here that I will also link to in the notes that I think are like the top items. Reintroducing content editing into the site editor, which you'll see there's this issue, and then there's also this issue that's related. I'm pretty sure they link to each other potentially. Basically around bringing back content editing. So having a pages section. And this includes right now when the navigation section was removed from the 6.2 release because it allowed content editing. It also includes things like clarifying the template versus content relationship. So there's a lot of work involved in just this area. This is the main issue though. So reintroduce content editing in the site editor. There is a wonderful, apologies for scrolling so quickly.
What would it even
There's
mean?
a really wonderful, oh, sorry.
Yeah, could you just scroll up for a second? What would it even mean to edit categories in the content editor?
Oh, this is honestly a prototype. So in terms of categories, thinking about it in terms of replicating like the different list views. So things like imagine you have your different templates listed out. Imagine the same thing happened with your categories. So it's basically just bringing your content editing into this. I would not get too caught up in this visual because it was honestly like a prototype from a designer, which if we scroll down a bit and see the more recent work, yeah, we're going to open up this PR. So there's a really cool PR that I have been obsessively watching because, as you can imagine, I want to test it with the outreach program. And so I'm going to play this video. It's just 48 seconds. I don't think there's any audio, but this is part of it's being worked on. So right now, this navigation screen, you can click on an individual page and have the option to edit it directly. This is currently live in the Gutenberg plugin, but was removed from WordPress 6.2. When you enter this, let me move you all around. You'll then see this edit template here, kind of helping distinguish the two. You can also edit the content here, but if you try to actually edit the template, you won't be able to unless you switch into that. So if you try to click, there's some like locking in place and you'll see there's like a notice down below and you have to actually switch into that. And then you'll also notice up top, you'll see this changes. So this top toolbar, a lot of work has been done here. And then you can edit from there. So this is a big change. It's something I want to get a lot of feedback on and that we need to prepare folks for. It also will not remove most likely having the general like WP admin pages section. So it'll just be different pathways to do the same thing, but you'll be able to do more in the site editor without leaving the site editor. Part of this work.
So the use case, just trying to think about it and trying to get it in frame of mind is a front page, and you're building a front page and you're doing a lot of content. At the moment, you maybe have to pull through static content, or it's hard, like you have to go between. So the idea is you just do it all there and then. It's not that you would necessarily only ever use the site editor as your editor. You would probably still use the editor.
You would probably still
day
use
to day, right?
Yeah. Front page is tricky to kind of pull from because it is a bit more of a like, I think what they're calling like a dynamic page. Like Saxon has an interesting issue on this actually.
Or you're trying to do like a editorial page or a creative directive page or something like that at the moment. So if you want to do like a creative directive page, you have to go in and out of template, you have to go in and out of format. This avoids you doing that. Is kind of, I'm trying to think of the use case that this is solved for, because it's easier to get your head around it if you think of the use case.
Yeah, I also think there's like another good use case is you're creating a navigation menu, you're adding, you know, your inspiration page and you create a draft, but you want to go in and publish it and build it out. So that was part of like what we did in the last call for testing. And right now there's actually not a way, which is part of an issue I opened, was there's not a way to actually publish from there, which is something that needs to be worked on as part of this. So if you're creating a pages navigation block, you can create draft pages, which is awesome. But within the CITER, there's no actual way to publish them. So you can edit them directly, but you can't publish. And so that's kind of like a weird setup that also needs to be thought of. And so you can see all this.
So from that workflow, can I edit a template while my demo content from a specific page is visible?
So if you'll notice in this, what happened when he switched into, so see how it says post title? Before it said about. So then when you switched into the template, it basically brought you to the page template. So when it switched into that, then you see post title. So this help clarifies and adds some friction into that experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very cool.
Because this would edit your template everywhere it's used. So that's part of what also has to be communicated, right? This is not just editing the template for your about page, it's also editing your template for everywhere
that's the change in the paradigm, because at the moment it's very like the thing you're in is only the thing you edit, and it's like side third wheel editor, I guess. Like it's like the third editor, right? When you go into the page editing, because it does feel like a third editor at the moment, because you kind of go in the side door, use the little page editor, and then kind of go in. So that this in theory eliminates that side editor, which I don't think helps anybody, because it does confuse you a little bit, or at least I find it very confusing. So I think it's good, but I think half of this, if this is coming in this release, is the communication, is that this is the use case, and that locking that you saw, making that a little bit clearer, I think, of like, now you can do this, now you can't do it. I think it's more positive, but being able to be very clear about what you can do or can't do instantly helps it.
And also the sidebar really needs to kind of say that you are kind of now in the post screen, and now you are in a template screen. There needs to be a very clear difference there, that one user can understand that where they are. Or it'll be a really confusing thing. Am I now in the template, or am I now on the page? Even if they see the title in the top, there needs to be more hints kind of explaining clearly where we're at, basically.
Yeah.
I guess, does there, or is it a case, and I'm just thinking out loud, is it a case of, if it feels right, you don't need to know where you are, it just needs to feel right where you are? So is it a case of the environment needs to fit more than you need to be super clear, like you are here and now you're doing this? That's a little bit like how we've worked before. We've been like, you're in the post page, you're in this page. Now it's like, this is the function you're doing here. These are the important tools that you need to do this. So I'm not sure whether it's a clear wayfinding, because that doesn't help you at the moment, knowing you're in the third editor. It's not the third editor, but you know, when you go into like the page,
the template editor,
whatever that is, calling it the third editor, which it kind of feels like, right? But it is different, but it doesn't help you that it is different. In fact, it goes against that it is different. It almost fractures by being different. So I'm wondering if, as long as it fits, I don't know the answer, but I'm also half wondering whether wayfinding, sometimes we put up signs a bit much. So it's more about like just being clear about what you can do or can't do. And the locking, I think, is clear. That locking down the bottom, I almost kind of want that a little bit. I know that snap bars are down the bottom, but somehow.
So basically making it even clearer in the document or canvas, kind of saying this is the template, or having sections on there that the typical say, oh, you see this is a template. If you click that, it'll automatically jump into editing a template.
I guess the purple is really, really subtle, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with that. I think it's good, but that purple is just super subtle.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. And this is part of why, like, I stay tuned, because this is going to be a huge help for testing. Like, this is going to be, I've been like waiting for this to ship. And honestly, I've tried to stay as
we are picking early work here, which is super unfair.
Like, this is very early.
I am sorry, it is super unfair.
No, this is great.
Although conceptually, I always worry when you have two very near interfaces that have different strengths and weaknesses. And so one of the questions that I would have is like, what is the use case where you would be like better off in the post editor versus what use case would you be better off in this other thing that you're constructing, and why are they different?
Yeah, that's great.
It would be kind of like treating, if you're going to a post and saying that you have reusable parts. And if you have reusable blocks, it's kind of like, let's say that the footer was actually just a reusable block and you went into any typical post. And if you start editing the reusable block on the bottom, a message should show up saying that if you edit this, it will edit all the places where you have that. And that kind of almost goes into like the footer template part or something like that, or different areas that they kind of intertwine so many so well. So say it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that ties in really nicely actually with some of what I also want to show. If we're okay moving a little bit on from this, I'm just being cognizant of time, and there is so much that has happened that I think we should move a little bit into where is it? There's this, and there's this. I will note just also a lot of work is being done around what they're calling the details view, which we can touch on in a little bit. But some of this will get clearer. So like when you're hitting going to a page, for example, imagine you have more information when you're editing the page in this dark gray sidebar section when you're drilled down there. The same thing would happen when you're in the template as well, which I think will also help some of this. But let's touch on that in a bit. But when it comes to kind of the reusable blocks and the different interfaces there, a big thing that's being worked on that could unlock a huge pain point that folks have brought up mainly in like a lot of times in the agency space, but also just anyone using patterns in general is how to keep patterns in sync, how to mass update them, how to lock them, all that sort of stuff. And so one of the larger efforts going on right now is this very simply titled the WP pattern block. It's a pretty technical conversation on here, but I want to show a video at the bottom that rather than getting stuck into the technical details, kind of visually shows what's going on. So I'm just going to play, it's 3.5 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I watched this earlier and I think we can do about like 1 minute and 45 seconds. But if you can't hear the audio, I think I might have to do something to make the audio work. Let's just see. Oh, share computer sound. Okay. If you can't hear it, just like say something.
This is a walkthrough of pattern syncing and also pattern management experience. We're in the site editor here. If we go into modify a page, for example, the home page, and if I want to turn this group into a pattern, I'll select the group, go into the more menu, and then we have this option to create a pattern. So this essentially replaces the create a reusable block option. Clicking on that, I then get this modal where I can enter a few details, for example, name, we might have a description, and then what category it belongs to. And then this other option here, which is whether I want to keep this pattern in sync. So anytime that pattern is inserted, all of its instances will keep up to date with changes to the main pattern. So I'll enable that, hit create, and I get a notification the pattern has been created. And now whenever I select a pattern that has been placed into the document, in this case this is a synced pattern, I can see that it is synced by the color and the icon. We can show certain information here, for example, when the pattern was last modified, and maybe in future provide some connections to other places where the pattern is being used. I then also see this content section, so it's mimicking content only, the content only experience that we've designed, which is also in place for the navigation block. It's also in place for page editing or just content editing within the site editor. So we're starting to form this sort of consistent behavior around treating how we treat global elements within the site editor. So we could click that to then modify the main pattern. But if we jump back out and then click into library, here's where we can see all of the patterns that we've added. It's a management experience.
So I'm going to pause it there because it basically just goes into a lot of the management stuff. Nitpicking here, he said that the icon indicates the pattern is synced. That icon doesn't communicate that to me. Yeah, that's part of what we have to figure out is actually the syncing state. So you'll notice this whole conversation kind of turns into a whole debate about like what is synced versus partial sync, what that's going to look like from the user experience point of view. What does it mean technically? So like in some cases, full sync is, I mean, I think, yeah, Gregor's had a great explanation.
We can pretty much fall back on the pattern everyone knows, which is GitHub and sync. There's pretty much like the iconography around that is universally understood by everyone. So I think we could pretty much use similar iconography, and then it's not really a debate. just from the iconography. That is the easier end of this conversation. There is a much harder end of the conversation. But I would also say that this reusable blocks had a purpose, but their purpose is limited. Patterns have had a purpose, but their purpose is being restricted in particularly the agency space. So this solves so much. Like, this might on the surface seem small, but this is gigantic. This is, I'm incredibly excited. Like, this makes me have all the happies and goodies because I can see this unlocks libraries of patterns for agencies, saving time, all those kind of things. Yeah, it's great.
It also does some neat stuff with basically allowing you to like change the content of a block, but then keep the design in sync. And then if you go even a step further,
is that the partial sync?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And you set that at the block level, do you? So you can set that at the code level?
In theory, they're working out, like, honestly, that's part of the debate right now in that issue, which starts to get over my head. But one of this thing that this allows is, like, if you can imagine having kind of this evolution, you could imagine being able to shuffle between content blocks that are similar and that have different designs.
But that's so there's a true design library, right? If you can have the style separate from the structure, that's a true design library that then as an agency you can have of your blocks.
Yes. Yeah. And part of this too also touches on these other two issues, which is some folks from Yoast had a contributor day and did a great job creating a UI to allow saving patterns. So this all ties into kind of this work. I don't know what will actually get done for 6.3, but this is one of the things that I'm really excited about and also I'm keen to test and make sure we have documentation and stuff for. So this is also a neat, I don't know if there's actually a video, I can't remember. Yeah, you'll see it immediately gets into this conversation where Matthias chimes in and is talking about the different sync. Oh, this is a great, so full sync, current reusable block, partial sync. It's like the SOUP pattern idea where you can actually kind of, have the split between the style and the content, and then unsynced how patterns work today. So this is part of what's being done. And then all of this ties into an overall library, which actually, to go even further, touches on phase 3 work. But for now, you can kind of see the beginning. So it's like if we change the inner workings of the WP pattern block, this unlocks, these different possibilities. And then from there, we have to have places where you can actually manage these different things in the same way you might manage reusable blocks. And it makes me pretty excited because it kind of nicely like layers up. And there's also, it means there's a good narrower scope that we can possibly get in for 6.3. Does that make sense? I want to make sure I touch on that one. Cool. Then I don't want to put you too on the spot, but if you want to talk about navigation and the navigation block stuff for 6.3, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I can chat about other things.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about it. So there's a few things that we've been thinking about. A lot of it relates, so there's some underlying pieces which we want to do more work on. So the navigation block relies heavily on a component called the link control, which is what we use to, this thing is what we use to edit and manage links in Gutenberg, just generally. But the navigation block particularly uses it because obviously your navigation block is about managing links. And there's a whole bunch of changes that we want to make to that, which if basically that component's been very, what's the word? Neglected limiting for a long time. So we need to, here we are. This is Saxon's.
Let me pull this
prototypes for this. So we need to just get this component in a much better state so that it can start to do some of the things that we need for the navigation block and for other places in Gutenberg as well. So that's one of the focuses, which I know isn't really navigation block, but that's the focus of it really. It's to enable more things in the navigation block, which at the moment are difficult to do, with the intention that then we'll be able to build on top of that. There are some other things though that are more navigation block specific. So there's the slugs work. I think it was in the navigation 6.3 priorities at the top.
Oh, that's even easier.
That one, yeah. So at the moment, we don't really have very good correlations between the navigation block that you create and the template that it was created to be part of. So we want to create a better connection between the navigation that you created and where you created it. So if you created one in the footer, we give it a name that says footer, or it matches the template part, or in the header, so that if you switch themes, then we can say, okay, you've got a template part which is called footer, and you've got a navigation block in it. So you probably want to use the navigation block that was created in your footer last time, and we can work that out for you. So that should give us some tools to guess which navigation block you want where when you switch themes. It also helps with classic menus, because at the moment when you import a classic menu, you just import it and then it still sits there and it says import it again, and you can import it as many times as you want. And once we give it a proper name when we import it, then we can say, okay, you've imported that one. We won't show you that as an option. So that's the slugs thing. Then there's a whole bunch of other work which is still very much up in the air, which we know we need to do something on, but we're not quite sure what yet, which is the browse mode. I think that's the tab on the left of this one.
Right here.
Yeah. So there's when you're in this zoomed out site editor view, one of the options on the left, so you've got template parts, global styles.
Let me pull up a test site real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to share one? Got one
that works too. Yeah. I was just about to pull up. I'm super lazy with InstaWP.
Here we are.
Perfect.
Excuse the theme. So yeah, you have these sections here. So navigation is available in the Gutenberg plugin, but it's not in core yet. So I think we're hoping we can get this in 6.3, but whether or not we can is still an open question, because this is quite buggy and we're still not entirely sure what this should look like. So there needs to be some effort that goes into managing this, exactly what we do here, etc., etc.
I have a question about that. What menu is being pulled into that area? That's
Well,
probably related to the slugs thing, right?
That is the biggest, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think at the moment it pulls in your first created navigation.
Right now, right now on my site, my personal site, it's pulling in my footer menu for some reason.
That might be the first one you created. I'm not totally sure. I can't remember what the logic is there. But yeah, the logic there is definitely it needs reworking. I think if you go back to that issue, Anne, Matthias had a kind of a view on what should be, which was essentially, if you have one navigation, we show it to you. If you have more than one, then we don't actually show the navigation at all. We just show a list of the navigations you've got. So let's keep going down here. Is that right? Yes. And then when you click on one of those navigations, when you've got a list of them, it doesn't let you edit them in the side at all. It just opens them. Yeah, there we are, in the preview, focused in. But there's a whole load of questions about this. There's still lots up in the air. So this is something else that's on our minds, but I'm not sure. I'm fairly lacking in any confidence that this will make into 6.3, but we can try.
So it would kind of behave exactly like templates.
Yeah, certainly very similar.
I mean, the pattern works. It just feels like an awful lot of work in a very short amount of she says, realizing how long navigation has taken so far.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is countless years, as long as Gutenberg has been running.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it would be lovely to ship it in 6.3.
I think the question is going to be, what can we do of this that is good enough to put something into 6.3 while still being useful rather than confusing, if anything. Otherwise, we'll have to wait for another.
Because it does feel like navigation at the moment won't get used until it's more prominent, or it gets used but not fully, right? Like that's been navigation's eternal problem. It's not been able to have enough testing because it's not been front enough. So yeah.
Yeah.
I had muted myself. Yeah, this is a huge, and you can see how all this relates, right? Because if you have content editing, that's also in the navigation menu. Like you can click on a page. So like there's all these layers to it, and different pathways and like interconnectedness. So I don't know. I've been thinking of 6.3 as kind of bringing cohesion, and clarity between the different relationships and kind of experiences. But I also think this will always be like iterated upon. And there's a lot to be done. Has been
Well,
said.
if navigation is shipped, I mean, let's be optimistic. If navigation was shipped as well, it's also a beautiful conclusion to a lot of these things that haven't had conclusion for a while, but there's so much work to do. I want to believe, I think is where I'm going.
I look at it this way, because one has the navigation block, and improving basically the navigation block and how that basically works. One can take some of those adjustments over into the navigation sidebar. So first of all, it seemed like the navigation block has the higher priority compared to the navigation sidebar area, because there's different models or something like that we'll take from navigation block into the sidebar area.
I just want to put one 2 cents in. I've helped a lot of people who are creating WordPress sites who are relative WordPress novices. And one of the things that's happened to them in full site editing is that they end up with 100 different nav menus because they create a new menu every time they try to do anything with the nav menu. So if you create a UI that lists all the nav menus on a site, it would be nice to have some visual indication whether it is actually used in a template part or page.
Yeah, it would be very nice. It's also technically quite challenging. But I do think also, I mean, for those people who've got 100 menus, it's too late. But we have made some changes recently to the way that navigations are created, which should mean that problem isn't so bad for new users. Obviously, people who already got 100, there's not much we can do for. But
I exaggerate, maybe 12, but I've seen it.
Yeah, I remember you asking me about that, Ed, and I was like, "Yeah, this is one of the issues we have to deal with." To close out on some what I'm going to call fun stuff, because this is like we're hardly even touching on the rest of this. There's also like interactivity API being implemented in image navigation block. There's some like simplified layout controls. I'm going to do like a very quick look at like I don't know how to exactly summarize these, but they're like technical technical work that unlocks interesting possibilities, I guess. So there's this command center that allows you to jump across different things. And let me see if I can find a video. So you basically have this kind of similar to the spotlight search, imagining that in your WordPress site editor and post editor. I think Riyadh just said he added it to both. Yeah. So it's behind an experimental flag right now. This is going to be part of what we're going to test in the next call for testing. So if this is of interest to you to kind of test this out, this is going to be a great time in the next call for testing to get into it. It's definitely a pretty interesting feature. And there's work being done right now to map out the different commands. I'm scrolling pretty quickly right now. But you can see some of these could be everything from editing a profile to creating a new template to looking at reports if you're using a plugin, for example. So a lot of really neat stuff. I also published a post about this for WordPress and artificial intelligence, and this is another great extension point to look into in the future, because you can imagine using this as kind of a prompt interface as well. So that's the first one to keep an eye out for, is the Command Center. The name is kind of floating around, Command Palette, Command Center, all sorts of stuff. There's also more revisions being exposed, which has been a huge pain point that has come up across the outreach program since the very beginning. So how do we actually show revisions for everything from styles, so like template parts, templates, all that good stuff. And a lot of work has been done here. There's also a really annoying bug that was just finally fixed yesterday. Someone committed it to core, and we're trying to figure out how to backport it, because right now you can basically I think it's this. Yeah. You can get into these screens and you can't get out. So you can kind of go and see the revisions, but you can't get out of it. And so I think right before this call, I actually was like, hi. Yeah, like 2 days ago, I was like, can we please help here? Because I really wanted to use this for the call for testing, but we could not, which was a bummer. And at this point, I think now we need to have it merged into core. We now need to get it somehow put back into Gutenberg, which is a fun problem to have. There's also, if I can find it, where maybe I put it in here. There's a really neat video. Oh, I'm gonna be devastated if I can't find it. Bummer. Okay. There is a video showing, it's like a very loose design, but you can imagine you're opening up style revision. So you've made a bunch of changes to your styles editor or to styles on your site. And then imagine you're looking at your revisions and you get into the zoomed out view, kind of like when you're changing style variations. So like, I'm going to hack this by talking it through. So like, imagine you're looking at, these are, rather than them being style variations, these are different style revisions, and imagining that you can see them side by side. So like the first one would be here and the second one would be here. And you could kind of visually see the difference between the two and go back in time going through the different revisions. That's part of what's being thought of right now, which I think is really exciting, and obviously also ties in quite a bit to phase 3 and kind of thinking about collaboration and how revisions will work there. So that's one of the ones I wanted to call out.
Can I just say something?
Finally, yes, please.
Patterns. It would be nice actually to drill down into patterns to see the different settings what makes up a pattern.
Mm.
And then actually go in and change the pattern into a custom pattern.
You mean for revisions or just generally?
Just in general, you're going in to look at styles, or I'm actually thinking about styles. You go and look into styles, click styles, and if you can just drill down into style to see that what makes up that specific style, and you're going to change the style. That would be interesting.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of this, of being able to see a hierarchy of styles.
But also drill down into style and being able to actually customize the style.
I think that one that you're showing there is really important, the hierarchy of styles, to get people to start using them as well, because it's also a learning as well as a using.
Yeah. I'm going to add notes to this.
The bit that gets me, I guess this is like to solve, of visual revisions is like storage, scaling, where does it stop? Humans, hoarding. What point do you set where you get rid, like all those kind of things? I think it's going to be kind of interesting how we move from like so like where do you say, oh no, like where, like storage space and all those kind of things, because that's always the problem when you get into like visual storage, right? Because then, okay, you've got the commands and you've got like better searching, but those things need to go hand in hand. The reason why like version control works in something like Git, and when you compare, is because it's smaller, right? But if you're doing like visual differences, that it's like seeing between a screenshot is harder than to see the changes between. There's so many questions I'm saying here, but right, like comparing visual changes in a screenshot is really difficult as to compare where this button changed, right? I guess in a future command, like when did this button change in a command, typing that in and then showing them, that's where it gets useful, seeing those screenshots, as opposed to I have 20, 30 screenshots.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's like less like we already have these revisions and right now they're just like listed in code, and then finding ways to like load each whenever you're trying to actually review them.
It's when all the pieces come together. That's what we've got, right? That we're getting Command Center come together with visual revisions, come together with like a better search. And when all those things come together and then we have some kind of differentiator visual, that's when the exciting magic unicorns happen.
This might be actually the visual I was thinking of. Let me see. This could be wrong. Yes, this is part of, but then imagine being able to compare the two by having them like side to side somehow. But this is part of, I mean, obviously this is a very rough design, like very simple design. It's not super robust, but you can imagine this being thought of in the future as having kind of like a timeline. And obviously this is all design level. This is not necessarily.
And that what you're showing makes a lot of sense if you think of Figma. So that's really true to how Figma kind of shows it now. And probably our answer is somewhere between Figma and Git.
Yeah.
Right? But that's how, not side by side, but that step through that you've got at the side is very Figma-y.
Yeah, this was the visual I was thinking of, which I'm relieved I found. Kind of looking at comparison of like 4 days ago. And of course, if it's zoomed out too much, what would this look like? What would it look like on a mobile device? All these questions remain to be answered. And also we need to, at the end of the day, also have more granular control over what has actually been changed. So one of my main issues that I've seen since the beginning of this outreach program is that we don't have saving. Okay, I'm not going to find the issue. Basically, whenever you're saving global styles, it just says like global styles have been saved. It doesn't actually give you a robust look at what's saved. And so that's another issue that has to be solved with this. I think it's under history. Nope. Cool. I'll find it at some point. But yeah, this is another issue that we have to solve that's been open for over 2 years now. So like when you actually go to save something, and this also relates to revisions, because let's say you just want to roll back part of it. You don't actually know what you're rolling back.
137 has no relation to anything.
Yeah, this is old, but yeah, I was like, what? Yeah. Gutenberg 10.0.2, which is wild. The last thing I wanted to quickly go over, and this is also something I really want to test and get some outreach program feedback on, because layouts, creating different layouts, understanding the layout controls has long been a huge point of feedback, and especially when you're building things for your site, this is a huge thing. And there is a new simplified layout panel that essentially allows you to have different controls and different icons, and ideally a bit more of a user-friendly experience. We are not going to have time to go into this because I need to take a break before my next call, but I highly recommend if you're interested in this stuff, like Ed, I can imagine you going through this, wanting to kind of see what's here and giving feedback. It's still, you can see it's a draft, but I know this is something that they're hoping to get in for 6.3 as well, just to kind of simplify the experience. And this adds in and goes along with the grid layout that we tested in the last call for testing that will also be tested going forward.
It looks complex.
I know, yeah. So you can see
it's complex, but I think it's needed. Like
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if we're truly doing site editing, we need tools like this. It's a simpler version than it could be. It could be way more complex.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see where it actually lands. Like, again, this is early work. As much of this stuff that I've been sharing, it's early, but it has momentum. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Is one of the things that's on my mind is that we're going to see this stuff ship quickly, and making sure we get feedback on each, and also have like an actual experience of using them, and not just I played around with this feature in this one pull request and like here's the bug I found. It's like, how does this all work together? What does it look like if I'm creating a navigation and I add a new draft page and then I want to go and publish it, and I also want to use patterns, and while I'm there I might make some like styles changes. What does that look like, and how do we account for that experience? So that is like a whirlwind of things. I also recommend going through that phase 2 issue, because a lot of that stuff, again, will set the framework for 6.3 from the Gutenberg side. There's also work being done on core when it comes to performance, PHP 8. And let me pull up. There's something else that I am forgetting. Some API, like fonts API work is also being done, which will set the groundwork for font management. So there's a lot of stuff happening in the wider project. And as always, just kind of continued bug fixes and enhancements that get into core. So With that, I'm going to wrap it up and I will recap this on Make Test. And we'll probably have to do another one of these soon because I feel like we hardly scratched the surface. So I really appreciate you all joining in and sharing your thoughts. And I will see you all in Slack.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.